Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Chaplaincy on the Go podcast. I'm your host, Josh Zorhoff. I am a teaching pastor and a therapist in the West Michigan area. And this podcast is brought to you by the Fearless family of churches. And I'm excited to have a conversation today with a friend of mine about happiness in marriage. Happiness in marriage. This is such an exciting conversation and such an important topic. A lot of people experience some struggles in marriage when it comes to children and navigating schedules and learning how to adapt to a new person in the relationship, specifically when you're introducing a child into that dynamic. And joining me today is my friend, Deb Gritter. She is amazing. We have a lot of fun laughing together in our conversations about work. She is a social worker by education, and she's done a lot of sitting with women in this marriage context. So we're just going to have an open conversation about what it means to be married and have kids and navigate that. So Deb, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Deb, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your family and your story and why this is such an important conversation for you.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Josh. I've been married to my high school sweetheart about 19 and a half years, and we have 4 kids. So I, like you said, social worker by education and by nature, and worked part-time after having kids, and third or fourth kid came around and it was all a lot. So then I was home for some years and have gotten back in the workforce in the last 3 or 4 years.
So let's dive right in to this conversation. You worked outside of the home and then transition to working inside of the home because first of all, just for anybody listening, never ask a woman, do you work? That's just a terrible way to go through it because working at home and working from home and working inside of the home those are all different types of work. And we'll get into that a little bit about what does it mean to be a mom with kids, 4 kids.
Yes.
That's work. That's a lot of work. But when we talk about marriage and we talk about children coming in and we talk about that transitional space of moving from the outside workforce into working at home, there's a couple of stats that I just want to throw out right away that I think will be interesting. And I think will be important because most of the time when I say this to young couples navigating the first few years of having a child, they're surprised by this statistic. When a woman gets married, her baseline happiness increases by 200% for the first 2 years. And then after that 2 years, it kind of moves right back into that baseline normal. And what's so fascinating about that, and if you think about it, everything's new, everything's fresh. You've got this other person, sex life is fun, and you're doing things together. And even though there's tension and all of that, it's all like basically honeymoon.
You're playing house.
You're playing house. You're doing all the things that you wanted to do. And then after a couple of years, you're like, hey, that was fun. Now life is normal. Okay, now we're doing things together. And it's not like you're unhappy. It's just, That's just normal. That's pretty, and that's true for most things in life. When it's new and exciting, it's fun. And then it falls into the routine and all of that. But then here's the other interesting statistic. When a woman has a child, what happens to the baseline happiness? Most people would say, oh, well, that goes up too. And they would be wrong. Baseline happiness decreases and essentially continues to decrease, and it never returns back to that normal.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Is that happiness in the relationship, like happiness in the marriage, or just overall?
That is happiness in life.
Wow.
Overall. Wow. Isn't that something?
Yeah, that makes people want to like, why would you have kids? And
well, I think in that respect, I think most of the time, if we were truly honest about how hard parenting is, it would cause people to ask the question, why would I have a child?
This is another conversation.
That's another conversation. Well, no, but I think that they're linked. So I think about it this way a little bit, just biologically. And this is a little crass, but I've been crass on the podcast before. When you have a child, you immediately bring a life into the world that, from a biological standpoint, is sucking life out of you.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not just for their own nutrition, which, if things go at least in the order that God designed it, and women are, in fact, sustaining a life. But even before that child comes into the world, they are receiving their life from you, mom. And then they enter the world and they're receiving their life from you, mom. And then you're not sleeping.
Right.
And you are in this heavy disruptive pattern. And though there's joy and beauty and you brought the life into the world and we know all of those things. And it's amazing. Like Christy and I, we love the fact that we have a child. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is also incredibly draining. Yeah. From an emotional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint. And, it's a little bit of that joke of like, mom. But how many times do you go through the day having someone say like, mom, and you're like, I have a name. I am a person outside of that title. But so much of that takes away from you. And I think that's where the definition, and there's a difference between happiness and contentment. Yeah. There's a difference between happiness and joy.
Yeah.
I can tell you there's a lot of parents that would say having a child is the most joy-filled experience, but I don't know if they'd always say they're happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, you said something about being called mom all the time. And when we find our identity in who we are as mom, and then things don't go well, because our kids are human, then our mom's identity has just plummeted some more. And then we struggle even more. So postpartum depression is in there, and isolation and comparison and all of that is separate kind of from marriage. But because women and moms are dealing with that totally affects their marriage when they feel insecure or lack of confidence or comparison and all of that.
So Brene Brown, love her.
Yeah.
Love her. She says that there are essentially two great fears that men and women have. Men, from a research standpoint, are afraid of failure. Women are afraid of not being enough.
Totally.
And that identity piece, I think, is really... it's critical to understand that, we as human beings, we do associate who we are with what we do. Yeah. And the title of mom is both what we do and who we are.
Yeah.
Your existence irrevocably changes when you become a mom. And so I think it then stands to reason because of even just from that identity shift. It is your title, but it also is who you are.
Yeah.
And I honestly think it's different for men.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I think it is. I can't tell you what I think it's like for women, but I can tell you as a father.
Yeah.
Because of the traditional upbringing or the culture that we live in. I'm a dad when I'm home.
Right.
Now I can say I'm a dad when I'm at work. But the truth is I have to work a lot harder to think about being a dad when I'm at work. And I can put it to you like this. This is probably, and I'm sure Christy's listening to this because she listens to the podcast. She'll tell you the most frustrating part of our relationship is the fact that if there's an open space on the calendar and someone wants to meet with me, I just fill it. And I don't even think about the impact it will have on our family.
Yeah.
So if someone were to call me at 3:30 and say, hey, can we meet in half an hour? Yeah, sure, no problem. And I don't even think about things like, well, Pike has piano practice today, or John and Jody, Christy's mom and dad might come over for dinner, and something's got to be thought out. And even if I'm going to do the cooking, like the table's got to be set, and is the table clean? And I just don't even think about those things because I'm like, well, I'm working.
Right.
When I'm home, when I get home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, I'm dad, I'm husband, I'm going to kick butt at all the things. But like right now I'm working.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, I'm working too. And I have to think about all of these things. And it must be nice, Josh. It must be nice to only have to think about one person.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the calendar will do that.
But the calendar is a representation of our priorities.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I actually have to think way more about our priorities and my priorities as a husband and as a father when I'm on the clock than she does.
Mm-hmm. Just naturally.
And that's not fair.
Right.
It is what it is.
Yep.
But I think that's part of the tension and this is part of it. And I'd love your thoughts on this. I feel like when the child enters into the family dynamic, all of a sudden, the wife neurologically has to shift from just thinking about herself to thinking for the child and thinking for the family. And sometimes that also means thinking for the husband, which unfortunately means she has another child to take care of.
Yeah. And I was just doing premarital counseling with someone and talking about one of the needs that husbands have is a sense of autonomy. And when wife acts as mom, partly because she feels she needs to, then husband loses autonomy, then there's resentment, and it just is a shift. So I feel like any cracks or weaknesses in marriage before kids just get completely exposed once kids come.
Well, that's a little different than most people think, because usually people are like, oh, I'm not like that 2 years. That 2 years dips. Yes. And it's like, oh man, we need something new. We need something to spice up the marriage. Let's have a baby.
Right. Because you're coasting and your things are great. And yet, did they ever really manage conflict well? Did they communicate their needs very well? Or did they just kind of get by?
Right.
Right. And so when there's kids and you've not really learned how to manage your conflict well, how to communicate that I'm frustrated about that you don't think about the calendar and our son, and for you to not get defensive, like those are things that now we're sleep deprived, we're stressed, we feel unappreciated, both sides of the table.
Totally. Well, and I think that, that's completely fair, because when you're sleep deprived and when you're stressed, your biological drive drops down. I mean, just practically speaking, when you're stressed and tired, sex is not going to happen as often as possible. You're not going to have the time for a date night. You're not going to have the time for connection. In fact, not even just from a sexual intimacy, but physical non-sexual intimacy, emotional intimacy, mental intimacy, spiritual intimacy. Yeah. All of those things drop down because you're like, I need to sleep. And when we're stressed, we have trouble accessing our connection to God. Yeah. Statistically speaking, people have trouble reading the Bible. They have trouble praying. There's just all of this reality that comes along with I'm busy, I'm stressed, and I'm tired. Yeah. And that can happen with one child. Yeah. And then you get two, then you move from man to man and you go to zone defense with three. Yep. And where there's so much joy, there's so much transitional transitional work that needs to happen there. And I think you're right. If there's a problem before a kid, then that kid and that new life coming into the family is essentially going to be a magnifying glass.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever is exposed it's going to be like 10 times more serious.
So when our culture has this mentality of you have a baby and it's just the two of you and you got to figure it out. Maybe a couple of people bring meals. And I think across the world, they do it so differently, right? Aunts come in, mom doesn't leave the bed for 3 weeks. People take care of everybody helps take care of. And we have this mentality that you better show up on church on Sunday after you had the baby and come back to work in 6 weeks and all of that. And I think that sets us up for continued stress and we're tired, right? Our bodies are still healing or all of that. And now you're just starting behind the 8 ball.
And that's if you have a uncomplicated pregnancy and delivery.
Non-traumatic. Oh, totally.
Not traumatic.
Totally.
Well, so this is interesting. So pregnancy is a trauma. Even if it is a healthy pregnancy, it's a trauma because it's a long period of disruption. Bessel van der Kolk, body keeps the score. We lose agency. Totally. Moms lose agency in pregnancy. They're no longer literally, you're not even in control of your own body. And so there's that. There's the physical changes that occur. Giving birth is a trauma.
Yeah.
The body is forever changed.
To both mom and baby.
Mom and baby. And again, in the healthiest of deliveries. And then bringing a child into the home is what those elements categorize as toxic stress.
Yeah.
Low sleep, high amounts of stress, total disruption to the schedule. We were fortunate in just the whole process, Christy and I were, because not only did Christy have the time off that she could, through the summer and stuff, she could be home with Pike. And so she had her 12 weeks or whatever maternity leave. And then she went back to work for like a month.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then we were in the summer.
Then it's summer. Yep.
And she was home because she's a teacher. And so that was amazing. And so that is, I recognize that is not, not normal.
Yeah.
And the other thing that wasn't normal is that John and Jody, her mom and dad, live 90 feet down the road. Yeah. And in the mornings when we would go to work and Pike was still sleeping in bed, we didn't have to wake him up to bring him over there. They came over to our house.
Yeah. Yep. But did that impact your marriage like positively?
Oh,
right.
Like, that's why I say like it was hard for us.
Yep. Yep.
I can't even imagine how hard it would be without them. And Christy and I talk about that. Like we wouldn't have made it. I don't know how people do it. I really don't. I remember the first time that Pike, we put him into his crib and we were not going to go in there. He needed to fall asleep by himself. And he was standing. we have like one of those little cameras, we can watch. It's like a movie in his room. But he was standing and he had both hands on the crib and he was like, just screaming and all this. And like, we're both crying. We're exhausted. Yep. It was like 11:30. Well, John and Jody have access to the camera feed. So they were watching too. And we heard the door open and John came in with a beer and Jody came in with a bottle of wine. And we just kind of laughed and they're like, yep. Like,
welcome to parenting.
Welcome to parenting. Yep. This is the greatest show, you know? And there was this moment where we're not alone.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not alone. We have partners in this. Mm-hmm. We have people. We have people that we can depend on. And but Deb, we're also a little weird because we vacation with John and Jody.
Oh, that's handy.
We do everything. Nice. Well, before I was married, me and, John, Jody, if you're listening, love you. Before I was married, I was like, why would anybody vacation
totally.
with their in-laws? Like, because round 1 wasn't a great experience
Not so
for me.
great.
Christy's round 2, better experience.
Great.
And then we got married, and I was like, well, I mean, why would anyone vacation with their in-laws? I mean, come on. And then we had a child, and I was like, why wouldn't you vacation
Yes,
with your
please.
in-laws? Because there's something really beautiful about that. For us, we know that they're there.
Yeah.
And we have people. Yeah. And in addition to them, we also have a community. We have a church. We have people in our life. Like Pike refers to them as Uncle Scott and Aunt Tina. Well, they're not related biologically, but they're actually significantly more related through our relationship in Jesus. Yeah. And so we have that, but I don't know what we do without that.
And I think not everybody, a lot of people don't have that. But I just encourage people to somehow prioritize your time alone. You time together as a couple, having support, building community, whether that's being in your small group, having friends. You can't do it alone. And we talk about happiness in marriage, and it's always suggested to have a weekly date night and do your best, and nobody can do that perfectly at all. But there has to be a priority to your marriage, to your relationship, to it might just be a Burger King date night, but you have to get away. But you need people to watch the kids so you can go away. So we had supportive parents, supportive in-laws. We tried to find cheap babysitters,
I don't know if this touches on it or not, but even with people who in our life who will watch our son. I know, like, when we ask John and Jody to watch Pike, or if he can have a sleepover or whatever, because sometimes we have late night stuff or whatever.
Exactly.
Christy feels guilty.
Yeah, that's very common.
Yeah, tell me about that. Where does that come from?
And I don't know, the babysitter thing, as well as just working, right? Like working mom guilt. It's such a thing. And I think we've done a disservice to tell people, and maybe hear me out on this, but I know so many great women who work and are great moms. So I'm not sure where the message is that you have to be home with your kids at all time to be a good mom, or you can't get a babysitter to be a good mom. Like, if you get a babysitter, you're not a good mom. Where did that message come from? And like, what a massive lie. So I'm not sure where that came from, but that's
okay. So I can tell you that 50% of the people that listen to this podcast are women, of a certain age, and likely moms.
Yes.
So you have a captive audience of anywhere from 100 to 150 women right now. So tell me, where do you think that comes from, and what do we do about it?
Probably, I'm doing a study on like healing care and learning
self-care
about
and self-compassion.
No, but healing prayer.
Okay.
And so we're learning about like our core longings and our core fears. And I think those beliefs go real deep. It's easy to say like, oh, culture tells us that, but it's probably either a message that was told us early on, or something we learned early on, that our worth and value comes from being around our children need us the most. And there's some innate, God wired us, like God wired the woman to provide for the child in that way that nobody else can. And so I think that's natural. I think I've heard that there's things that happen in a mom's brain when the baby cries, it's different than the dad's brain. So it's like biologically, physiologically, we respond differently to our child's needs.
Which is good, because otherwise babies would die.
Exactly. Like God is keeping babies alive by that. So moms, when you feel like you can't let them cry, that's for good reason, because we're not wired to. So I think there's core longings and core beliefs that we need to dig into a little bit about, and people might have a different mindset on that. I don't know that I struggled with the babysitter guilt as much as work, I think. Because for me, I really did prioritize. Like I believe that message that the best gift you can give your kids is a healthy marriage. And so that meant time with my husband. And I'm so thankful for people who supported us to, watch the kids and even try to get away for longer periods of times. They'll be fine. I remember crying like when I just wanted to come back because I missed my baby and I just wanted to be back.
Yeah.
But I just knew it was really, and I think I felt secure in who was watching them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about that for a minute. I do want to talk a little bit about the work guilt. I know that it's hard for Christy and I to prioritize a date night. And when we have a date night, we have to be really careful about what we talk about because we can easily ruin a really good date night by talking about things that we haven't talked about in a while that usually revolve around things that have ticked us off about the other person.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody's made that mistake before. Like my friend Dave McGovern, who's been on the podcast, he says, dates should include cake. Okay. It's the acronym CAKE.
Yeah,
So C is, celebration. E is for, eye contact. Oh no, C is for celebration. A is for affirmation.
Nice.
K is for kindness and E is for eye contact. Your date should have that. And if it doesn't have that, then you shouldn't be talking about it because you're ruining a really good date. Like we choose what we talk about on our dates. Yeah. But I know when we go out, like Christy and I, if we'll go out on a date walking downtown Holland somewhere and Pike's not with us, it's different for her. If Pike is with us, we can be holding hands. We can be the same kind of night, all of that kind of stuff. But she's constantly thinking about why is he climbing on that?
Oh, totally.
Please don't jump into traffic. What's he doing? And I'm like, this is great. We're just holding hands walking down the street. Like her and I we think differently about that. And I've had to learn over the years that like, in order for her to be present and for us to have true connection, he can't be there.
Right. I know.
He just can't.
They can't be there.
And
we love them, but they can't be there.
And that also means that in order for us to be present together and have true connection and to have the cake date night, that means that we also have to prioritize times where we're talking about the things that are really important.
The hard stuff.
So, so hard stuff for us, groceries and meal planning. Believe it or not, that's actually a really hard thing because she's working and I'm working. Yeah. If we don't want to waste a whole Saturday or Sunday running around to 4 different places to get the best deal on groceries, which don't even get me started on groceries right now because it's prohibitively expensive. Why is it $20 to get a canned good over here and $5 to get it over at Target? Can't they just call each other and say, hey, here's what our prices are? Right. It'll be great. Meyer, price match.
There you go.
Meyer, can you price match? Because that would just make my life a lot easier. But anyway, even with the pickup and all the things, you can easily spend 4 hours driving from place to place, getting what you need. And that's not even just putting in what you need. Then it's meal prepping. And it's
just
like,
to sustain.
What are we going to eat this week? That can cause a lot of tension for us. And I had to, I talked with Christy about it. I knew it was a problem. She was spending a lot of time. She was feeling alone and frustrated and all of that. I want to help.
Yep.
But I'm like, you're the one like putting together the plan. So like, do I need to go on the Meyer app and you need to go on Target? Like how do I help?
Yep.
And you know what we did? I put on the calendar a 1 hour block where we talked about what we're going to eat for the week. And we talked about the schedule and where I'm going to be and where she's going to be. And, we got a little book that says, make your meals here. And then on the side, it's the grocery list.
Love it.
We picked it up in Mackinac at this place called Poppins. It was amazing. She's like, this would be really fun. I'm like, yeah, we should use that. And then we didn't use it for 6 months. And now we're using it, which is totally great. But I had to set that schedule and say, okay, hey, we're going to talk about this on Thursday. And I put it on the calendar.
I know.
I put it on the calendar and I invited her to it.
You invited her.
Yes.
But otherwise you were spending your date nights talking about groceries. And
or how frustrated we are because of groceries.
We also put things on the calendar for a while. There was a, we're going to schedule intimacy and we're going to schedule talking about things.
We call it Yahtzee.
Yes.
I
know. Not everyone knows, but
yes. Well, people who come to Ridgepoint Services,
they know this.
My wife and I call intimacy Yahtzee, and it's on the calendar, and it says Yahtzee.
Yep. Put it on the calendar.
So I've ruined it for all of you who love Yahtzee. I've ruined it for you, and I feel so happy about that.
So, you gotta schedule it. You can talk about it, and that way you're not fighting about it.
And I'll tell you another trick. This was amazing. We took Pike to, for those of you who live in the West Michigan area, a place called Urban Air.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Holland. It is a trampoline park, but so much more. They have so much for kids to do. We took him there on a random Friday, and it was like $40 for 2 hours.
Sure.
But we sat at a table while other people who were paid to be there essentially watched our child. So it was like babysitting.
Yes.
But we sat at the table. He was having a great time. And for 2 hours, we talked about the whole month of February.
Oh, cool.
And where she was going to be and where I was going to be. And we talked a little bit about meals and big things coming up. And I had this moment where I'm sitting here. We're on a date. We're on a date.
Yeah, it's a date.
It's a productive date.
Yeah.
It's not a date night, but we're prioritizing that time. He's having fun. He's not complaining. She's present. I'm present. And I was like, for $40, we couldn't pay a sitter for this. And I had this revelation of like, I'm going to buy him a membership.
Good. You're going to do the membership. Perfect.
Because it's way, and it's like Tommy's car wash.
Yeah.
You go once.
Yeah.
You go once, you might as well have it.
Get it for the month. That's genius.
Exactly. And so now it's like, well, now we just need to schedule, when is Pike going to Urban Air?
Yeah, Urban Air nights.
So we can have,
love it.
We can have this moment where we're connecting.
I know.
And I know for some of you, it's like, we have one child. It's not fair.
We can't do that.
I understand that.
Maybe they have family memberships. I bet they do.
They should.
Yes.
If you're listening and you work at Urban Air, you should do that because that just makes sense. But that was a really good hack for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've worked with couples too to say like, hey, if you need to connect, there's a sweet window of time after the kids go down where one of you make a cheese plate, or if you do imbibe, kind of in a alcoholic beverage, make a margarita or whatever, and just make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, that's fine. Like get some tea or whatever, but make it unique and take that 20 minutes to just do a check-in. Like, hey, how was your day?
Yeah.
How was your day? Like, give me the top 5 things that were helpful, for you today, or top 5 things that were frustrating. If that's too much, like I always do the sad, mad, glad.
Yep.
What's one thing that made you sad? What's one thing that made you mad? And what's one thing that made you glad? I call them the ads. Like do that. But have a check-in and then have a moment where you can say, what's tomorrow look like? Yeah. Where are you? Where am I?
Yep.
How are the kids going to make it from point A to point B and stay alive? That's really important.
It is. And I can't help but think of women who wish their husbands would be open to that, and not sure how to communicate that, right?
Why is that?
That need? Well, because when kids come along, it's I gotta think of more people than myself, and that's for men and women. But
why? I guess I'm probably more saying, why do you think men aren't open to that?
Right, because they want to do their own thing. They want to watch what they want to watch and veg out.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I'm saying that sounds really pathetic.
Yeah. That's why they're in my office. Right. It's a bummer.
I see that too. And this isn't a dig on the male species. It's not.
No, it's not meant to be.
I think here's one challenge. I think for me, and I think a lot of the men listening, we could probably resonate this, women, moms for sure. Listen, 50 years ago, like if you're a man and a father and you went to work, you made some money, you worked hard, you came home, maybe you helped with the homework, maybe you didn't, and you made it to the baseball game and maybe you coached. Mm-hmm. That was like you were crushing
Super dad.
You were crushing it.
Yeah.
The game has changed, my friends. It's not that way anymore. Yeah. And what you grew up with and what you witnessed and saw is just not the same. We could go on and on about how, right now in the United States, you really do need double income to, like, that's part of it. And maybe that has to do some of it with the working guilt, but that's just a reality.
Well, right. Expenses.
If you have a double income, like that's a thing. And that means your wife is working out of the home and working at the home. And if you're punching in and punching out and you're coming home and then you're sitting down and you're binging on Netflix or watching the football game and you're doing your thing and you're not attentive to the needs of the family, I'm sorry, that is no longer sufficient.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
Yeah. And you don't see marriages fall apart in the first couple of years because they're just surviving and they're going to just get by. But that 4, 5, 6, 7 years when they've just said, never mind this, we started in the wrong place. And we never, that's when I think it's time to just invest in repairing. You have to make a change, but.
Well, I mean, if honestly, and this is not, again, it's not male, female, not in this regard. Let's put it in a different context. If you're working with someone, you in your job, you're working with someone who punches in and is doing the bare minimum, and it means that you have to overcompensate to get the job done. Yeah. You at some point will go to your boss and say, "Hey, listen, either they've got to go or I'm going to go."
Yep.
And because you do have this, never mind, I'll do it myself. Yeah. And in marriage, if your wife is saying, you know what, I'll do it myself.
Yep.
Well, she probably can.
Yeah, for a while. It'll work for a while.
It'll work for a while. Yeah. And then she'll say, well, if I can do it by myself, then I can do it without you. Yeah. And I can do it without the stress.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard.
Yeah.
But that's why it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I had a moment, it was a couple of years ago. There's a Hebrew word, barak. It's where we get the word Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. Okay, blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe. The word barak means to bless, but it's at its root, it actually means to bend one's knee. Essentially to get low,
serve, to
lift others up. That's the word to bless. Yeah. To be a blessing means to get down low and to serve so that someone else may be lifted up or supported.
Yeah.
And that word transferred over to, for me as a husband and as a dad, well, and as a human, what does it mean for me to bend the knee to my family? Mm-hmm. And I have essentially an unofficial policy for most days. Mm-hmm. Not every day, because that's exhausting, but for most days, and it's still exhausting most days, that I will be the last one to sit down.
Oh, wow.
At the end of the night.
Yeah, that does sound exhausting.
I used to be the first one to sit down.
Sure.
And I would never get back up.
Yeah, right.
Now I'm the last one to sit down. That means when dinner is done, Christy and Pike will sit down and they'll snuggle and they'll watch a show, and I will clean up dishes, or I will put things away, or I'll put in a load of laundry, or I'll do whatever it is, but I'm the last one to sit down. Sometimes I'll get, lunch is ready for the next day, or sometimes I'll clean the kitchen so it's ready to get lunches done in the morning, or I'll get the coffee ready for the next morning, or whatever it is. And there are some days where it's like, I'm exhausted too, and I'm going to fall asleep in the chair, and I'm okay with that. But what it's forced me to do is to start to see the home through my wife's eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
and see tomorrow through her eyes.
Uh-huh.
And the more and more I do that, the more sensitive I become to things that she needs. And honestly, the better it is for our family. There's more peace.
Oh, yeah. I had a wise coworker who worked part-time, but she worked noon to 8 or 9. And she, missed bedtime. And she said, well, yeah, but those are daddy's nights. And you know what? It's great because dad gets to do it. First of all, dad gets to do it his way then, because we moms, we like to micromanage how things get done. So dad gets to have his way, but also he does it all. He feeds them, he puts them to bed. And I thought that's a good advice. And I followed her advice. I thought, all right, I'm going to do this, noon to 8 day. And my husband would come to the office and we would switch cars. We only had one key. So he had to pick up the key from the front desk and he'd get my van because we had the car seats, and he would go pick up the kids from grandma and grandpa and bring them home and put them to bed. And I think it builds confidence in him as a dad. But it's also the mom's going away for a weekend gives them a chance to say, dad's on, dad'll handle it. Dad can do it. And then dad's like, oh, there's a lot to do here. And
figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? If they want to bring the kids to grandma and grandpa's, that's okay too. I don't think we should get worried about how they do their dad weekends. But.
No. If you're asking me to be resourceful, then trust the way that I go about being resourceful.
That's hard for women.
I mean,
that's hard,
but no, seriously, but that's
good.
Let me learn.
Yeah.
Let me fail.
Yeah.
Let me learn. Let me fail. Let me figure it out. Let me do things imperfectly.
Yeah.
And is it the way that you're going to do it? No, it's not the way you're going to do it. It's not.
Oh, yeah. Those conversations of deciding how to parent and moms, we've read all the books and listened to all the podcasts, so we know how to parent. But our husbands haven't necessarily read all those books, so we're going to tell them how to.
Right.
And yet, it was this idea that my husband said to me one time, "This isn't my first rodeo." It's like, yep, you're right.
Right.
I bet you can do this. But
let's be honest. If you do that, you're sending mixed messages. So because if you're like, I don't want to have another child, meaning I don't want my husband to be like another person that I have to mother.
Yeah.
Cool. Get that.
Yep.
Please stop telling me how I should do things.
Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's hard for women to hear, but what's the worst that can happen? I think is a fair question.
Can we at least come to a foundational assumption, understanding? I love my son and I want the best for him. And I'm going to work with him differently than you would. But I'm a functioning member of society. I'm a tax-paying citizen. Yes. I have a master's degree. I'm pretty sure I can figure this out. And it's good for me to struggle a little bit.
Maybe, figure it, allow you to figure it out on your own. That I think that's hard for moms too. We don't want to see potential failing happen.
Right.
But trusting that, God gave you this child just like God gave you the child to me. And so that's hard. That's hard for moms to let go of, but I think that's really wise.
We've had to navigate that. We've had to navigate, I am going to do things differently than you. And I think this comes back to the communication, conversation of if we haven't done the work, Christy and I, of, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this way, or I need more of this. And if I get that, this is how I'll feel. Or I'm not getting this, and this is how I feel as a result. If we haven't done the work to be assertive in that way, and we haven't done the work to learn how to listen to each other in a way that conveys empathy of I hear you saying this. I understand this. I'm sorry about that. Let me work on that. Give me the time to figure it out. Who did I talk to? I talked to a lady yesterday. She said that her son-in-law and daughter have this phrase, try again.
Yeah.
Which if one of them says something that is unchoice or Yes, and
Yeah.
I mean, every
Yeah.
couple has this.
Has a thing.
You'll say something that inevitably just didn't come out the way
Right.
you wanted, or it wasn't received
Yep.
in a way. Instead of saying, well, screw you.
Oh yeah. Getting
just,
real defensive.
hey, try again.
Yeah, let's try again.
Try again.
Can you try that again?
Yeah. Christy will say to her kids, and she'll say, in our family sometimes, she's just etch-a-sketch that one out.
Oh, I
And
love it.
For those of you who don't know what an etch-a-sketch is, it was this tablet before iPads, and it didn't do all the cool things, but you had to use these little wheels, and it would get a magnet that would carve in through sand. For those of you who know what an etch-a-sketch is, you just shake it out. So etch-a-sketch it out.
Just etch-a-sketch. Can we etch-a-sketch that one?
Mm-hmm. But it's if you haven't done that work.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to navigate kids and doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really hard.
Yep.
And so, one, finding time to connect, prioritizing the important conversations in addition to the date nights.
Cake. Have fun.
Have fun.
Yeah.
It's okay to have fun. It's okay to have fun without the kids.
It's important.
It's super important. And those are resources that you need to lean into because, and this is one thing I do a lot with couples. I ask them, why'd you marry each other in the first place? Why? If you're not saying that on a regular basis, I married you because you made me feel important.
Mm-hmm.
I married you because you made me feel safe. I married you because I can't imagine living my life with anybody else.
Yeah. Please
don't take that for granted and assume that the other person knows that.
Right.
You need to name that. In fact, I would argue if you're going to have a discussion about anything that's important, it should probably begin with, I want you to know this is why I married you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It starts with the, hey, I know this is what I think about you in a positive way. And I also know that you love me. And I coming at a conversation, being able to say, I know that you love me. I know you're not trying to be something. So can we talk about this? I think that helps.
I know you love me. I know that you
think I'm a good dad.
You think I'm a good dad.
Yeah.
You want me to feel important and special. I know that you want all of these things.
Yeah.
I feel a little frustrated.
Yeah. I've got my stuff.
Yes.
I got some stuff going on.
But let me start with just acknowledging the general assumption that you and I have together that we actually want to be married together. Yeah. Don't take that for granted. Mm-hmm. Because when you do, you run the risk. The story we tell ourselves is the story that we live and look for.
Yeah.
And if you're not hearing enough that you're loved and you're safe, or the other person loves you and wants to create a space that's safe, you're running the risk that there's a really good chance that you're going to start telling yourself the opposite of those things. And then we're really in trouble.
Yep.
So find a way to connect. Find a way to remember together this common ground of love and what drew you together in the first place. But Deb, I want to give you the last word to some moms and wives of if they are listening to this and they're like, oh my God, this is totally my life. It's like they can see into my soul right now and my frustration. What's a word of hope for them?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say there is hope. There's always potential for things to be better. And knowing you're not alone and knowing God's call in your life is good. And it's hard work, but it's meaningful, and reach out for help, because there is help and ultimately hope then.
Yeah. Where do people go for help?
Well, they can go to their chaplaincy people. They can go to their pastor. They can reach out to me.
Yeah. There's a couple of dynamics here as we close up. If this has been an important conversation with you, first of all, we encourage share it with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
because you're not alone. Second, if you have a pastor or a person in your life who can provide counsel or a good friend who will listen, that's a great start. If you do, in fact, need some help with that, reach out to us at chaplaincy@fearlessfollower.org. You can go to our website, fearlesschaplaincy.org. If you'd like to get in contact with Deb and have a time to sit down with her, she's totally down to do that. So we just encourage you, send us an email and we will get you in touch with that. And if you'd like for maybe some of these conversations to occur in your workspace, and you have an organization or you work for a company that's open to conversations about marriage, communication, mental health, all of the things, we'd love to come in and work with you. And we're looking forward to continuing this conversation. Join in next time as we continue to work through the reality of emotional, spiritual, and mental health in the workplace. We'll talk.